Assistant head coach, special teams coordinator Darrin Simmons stops by in the trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics, and he talks about the overall draft and how it benefited the overall team speed and how that trickles down to special teams. Everybody the Cincinnati Bengals drafted can run. Not worried about the punter they drafted running necessarily, but everybody else, 4.5s or better. It is crazy. Bengals team speed is probably at an all-time high, as good as it has ever been. And Darrin Simmons talks a lot about special teams philosophy, working players into his special teams. It's a very interesting conversation with Darrin Simmons, and you're going to be glad you took the time to check it out. You made a great decision joining us in the trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics here from our outstanding studios, because our guest today is a football lifer. This guy is all about football. Assistant head coach, special teams coordinator for what, 26? Is it 26 now, Coach? Man, Darrin Simmons. What's up, Coach?
Not much. How we doing? Thanks for having me on.
Oh, man, what a run. All with the Cincinnati Bengals, 26 seasons. You've seen a lot. This football team, when I was doing prep, and talking to people around the league that I've talked to for a while, Coach, and can really trust and everything, they're all like, man, the Cincinnati Bengals, from a 53-man roster projection standpoint, it's top 3 in the NFL. I heard number 1, I heard number 2, no lower than number 3. Organizationally, it's been a phenomenal job of putting a roster together, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think that, all the people upstairs, all the personnel guys, I think Duke and his group, we work, in conjunction with those guys, and they really do a good job of working with us. They hear what our opinions are, and we collaborate. And, you're never going to have unanimity on personnel decisions, whether it's the draft, whether it's, keeping your 53-man roster together. It's never going to be, all together. But in the end, we all respect the decisions that are made, and we go with them, and we make the best of them. And I think we've done a really good job of putting together a good, solid team, and I think we improved it over the weekend.
No question. The big board, everybody has their own big board, and none are exactly alike. Everybody runs different systems. They value, I'd say there's probably more consensus on value positions than not around the National Football League, but there's still going to be differences in everybody's big board. The Bengals spend a lot of time and put a lot of resources into formulating that big board that you guys reference throughout the draft, and pretty much it's the Bible. You stay pretty much with that, don't you?
Yeah, I think that that's what we've done a good job of in the last couple of years. There have been times in the past where I think we want to, all of a sudden somebody gets a certain feeling, or the draft's shaping out a certain way, maybe something unexpected happened. And sometimes there's talk about straying away from what we have, on our draft board. But in the end, we always seem to come back to it, and it always seems to be the right decision to come back to it. And I think the more discipline we've had with staying with whatever our board is, instead of making a rash decision right at the last minute, over as a reaction as to something else that's happened. Like you said, we do spend a ton of time talking through all different scenarios and ranking these players, as they fit for us, not just what the league values them as, but how do they fit for us on our team, in our situation. And, that's how we arrived at, getting Miles. That's how we arrived at getting him. That's how we arrived at a lot of the pick. Well, really every pick we got. There's been some talk at times, like I said, from straying away from that, but in the end, we always come back to it, which is the right thing to do.
When you're putting the board together, and I know you have a voice, a very, very strong and very valued voice because of special teams. A lot of these guys, when they come in, every rookie that's drafted isn't going to start in the National Football League. Just a very small percentage of them are. They'll have roles, and everybody that the Bengals have drafted are really good football players, and they'll all have roles, whatever it may be, 12 to 18 snap role with either side of the football. But special teams is where they can make a significant contribution as well. and so your voice is very, very important. I'm just curious, do you have your own special teams board that you meld into that big board, or how do you go about, getting your opinion onto that big board as much as you possibly can?
Well, that starts back, early on. We go through our draft meetings. I will look at the rankings we have, or who we feel the top positional players are, and certainly for positions of need, or more need than other years. So like this year, for instance, I spent a little more time probably on the corners and the safeties and the tight ends, maybe than I did on the linebackers. In past years, maybe we had a bigger need at linebacker. This year, I knew it was probably going to, some of our focus was probably going to lie in the secondary. So I spent a ton of time, specifically at safety. I spent a lot of time at corner. I spent some time at running back after losing Samaje. So I try to focus my efforts into areas where I think we may go in the draft in terms of picking positions, and then I'll start at the top. What the offense feels are the top players at that position, and I'll go through and see what their special teams value is. Like for instance, if you want to pick the running backs, like Bijan Robinson is going to be a starting running back for some player. He's not going to play on special teams, so
right.
It's really a waste of time for me to watch him on special teams. But Jamar Gibbs, the running back from Alabama, had a role. He was a dominant kickoff returner at Georgia Tech. And then that continued on to Alabama, and right on down the line, I looked at probably the top 4 or 5 rounds worth of running backs. I did the same thing at corner. Did the same thing. It's probably even more extensive at safety, because most of the time safety is going to be the safety position is going to be probably a 4-phase starter for me. Whereas maybe corners aren't always. Sometimes corners are. If you find one that's a 4-phase starter, you're really ahead. Because a lot of times those guys don't play like on kickoff return. You want bigger guys that are blocking and trying to create movement. Corners aren't as big as contributors there. They contribute in coverage, whether it's punt, whether it's kickoff, punt return. They contribute. So I spend probably a little more time ranking the safeties, knowing we'd lost 2, and knowing we had to try to find somebody there. So
right.
I spent a lot of time at some of those positions of need, and then we go through our draft readings and our draft meetings, earlier on in the middle of the month. I voice my opinion. We're talking about a specific player, like for instance, Jordan Battle. Whenever Rob Livingston is the safeties coach talks through Jordan Battle, I then input whatever information I think might help or hurt that guy, depending on what my opinion is,
Right.
And so he'll kind of move up or down a little bit. I don't know that it's real significant, but especially if you have 2 players who have equal value, if he does something in the kicking game, that guy bumps up a little bit. Or, if you have a corner who's a returner, or a wide receiver who's a returner, or a cover player, and they have some type of value for me in the kicking game, they usually bump up a little bit. I think that's where we came up with like Charlie Jones, in instances like that. Not only is he a good receiver, he's a quality receiver, but he can help us in the return game.
Sure. And Charlie is a guy that I'm sure there were discussions in the 3rd round, but Jordan Battle's there. And is he, in your estimation, Nick Saban is not usually effusive in his praise. He'll praise players, but he just gushed about Jordan Battle. And like he's another coach on the field. This guy just understands football at every level. And was he as good a special teams player as there was in the country in your estimation?
Well, I think he was a solid one. I think he had a lot of snaps in it, and you could tell it was important to him. There's so much that goes into the evaluation process for each one of these guys, whether it's, there's the physical portions of it, there's the mental portions of it, and there's the, obviously the medical portion of it. And, when you get to the mental side of it, you can gain so much just from having a conversation with the guy. I've always felt that, we have to make decisions on players based on just gut instinct in some cases. In some instances, you can get a deep dive into them, and really have a lot of extended conversations. I think that's what you really had since, ever since COVID. And now that you have Zoom and we can Zoom with these players, you have greater access to them, where we never used to be able to do that before. So you can have, conversations with them, a couple hour conversations with them you can have with each one of them. But I just remember we were at the combine, and you can have X amount of interviews, in-room formal interviews with a certain number of players. I believe it's 45 now. One of those was with Jordan Battle. And I can remember at the end of that interview, that 15-minute interview saying, or 20-minute interview, whatever it is now, saying, putting a big red star by his name, saying, man, if we can come out of here with having a guy like this on our team, we're way ahead. Because, he was outstanding. And everything, like you said before, I feel like he's a coach on the field. His understanding of what his responsibility is, what everybody else's responsibility is, was off the charts. I felt like that way whenever we coached the Senior Bowl the one year. If we can come out of this Senior Bowl and get Akeem Davis-Gaither on our team, we've improved. And just after that little 20-minute interview at the Combine, I felt that way about Jordan Battle. If we can, if there's a guy that just after having a 20-minute conversation with him, this is a guy we want. He's built of all the right stuff. He's built of the stuff that we want. And so I really felt good after he walked out of that meeting. I really felt good about, man, this is a guy. And hopefully all the other factors, marry up to what the mental side of was. Hopefully the physical parts, the film and then the medical, they all work together. And, thankfully for us, they did.
I had heard that when he was in those kind of meetings, his football acumen was like off the charts, was like after about 2 or 3 questions, like, geez, this guy, let's talk about something else. This guy's good at the football down. Yeah. Then when like you said, Coach, you look at the tape and he's the guy. He's pointing, not just him, he's pointing what everybody's supposed to be doing, like checklist, make sure you can, he's like he's the conductor out there, and it's, man, this guy's into it, boy.
Yeah. I really think I'm really excited to get to work with him. I think he'll help. He'll get acclimated very fast to what we're doing here.
So let's go through the 8 draft picks, of course. One being, let's start with your punter that you drafted at 217 with the 6th round pick you got in the trade when you traded back in the 3rd round. Brad Robbins out of Michigan. Tell us about this guy.
So Brad's an older guy. I think he's 24 years old. So, he was one of those guys that took advantage of a COVID year. And so he was able to get another year of playing major college football at a good place, at a successful place like Michigan. And, I think one of the other factors that probably played into that too for him is he knew he had a draftable kicker, going to have one of the upper level kickers coming back too to team up with, and Jake Moody.
Right.
So Michigan's punter and their kicker both got drafted. Their snapper got drafted 2 years ago. So they've had a pretty good specialist group right there. Mm-hmm. I think Brad's from Columbus, so he's kind of a defector. He goes from Columbus and he goes up to Michigan to school. But Brad, I think, led the country in hang time the last 2 seasons at Michigan. Mm. So he really does a nice job of getting the ball up in the air. I think he has really good control. Control meaning he's really good at getting the ball outside the numbers. He does a really good job of directional punting, getting the ball up in the air, and really limiting your exposure to the returner. He does a good job of handling all of those situations. I think he's also a spectacular holder. As I said before, he was holding for an All-American kicker at Michigan and Jake Moody. Right. So that part of it, when he gets in town here, we'll slide right in and he'll work fine with Evan, and he'll compete right alongside there with Drew. So it'll, all the battle lines, all the preseason stories will be the Ohio State Michigan competition. So we'll see how it shakes out.
I'll tell you, the hang time and then the weather. I mean, kicking at Michigan, he was exposed to that and hung in there with that. Hang time and direction, are they equally important, or is one more important than the other?
I think direction is really, really important, because you don't, when you're playing good returners, you don't want to cover the full 53 1/3 yards on the field. You want to be able to squeeze and condense. Right. And, if direction is 1A, then hang time is 1B. I don't think it's 1 and 2. It's 1A, 1B. They're almost equally as important. Right. And so I think the ability to squeeze and condense the field by having good direction, by getting the ball outside the numbers or as close to the sideline or even out of bounds if possible. I'd love to see the ball go out of bounds. Right. Then it alleviates all of it. But I think Brad is he's an advanced punter in that regard.
Hey, Dave Lapham here to tell you about one of Cincinnati's fastest growing companies, First Star Logistics. They're currently drafting freight brokers to join their sales team. Apply at firststarlogistics.com. First Star Logistics, opportunity knocking. So everybody that was drafted otherwise. Murphy, 270 pounds and runs in the 4.5s. Turner, 4.26, fastest guy. I mean, Battle can he runs well enough. Charlie Jones is a 4.4 guy. Chase Brown can run. Andre can run, very athletic. DJ Ivy. I mean, the team speed, the overall team speed. Everybody that you drafted has some exposure to special teams, and with hang time and proper placement and speed to cover, I mean, you really improved yourself potentially, Coach, huh?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when you look at it, other than if you take the punter out of it, I mean, the slowest guy we drafted is probably a 4.55 guy.
It's crazy.
So that's a good thing. I think we've shored up the lines a little bit in terms of free agency. Help them with the offensive line and even getting some help maybe on the defensive line too. But obviously, and a lot of these guys and the fact the athleticism that shows up and the speed that shows up. Anytime we can help our overall team speed, man, that's a good thing.
So Charlie Jones, has obviously experience, the wide receiver that was drafted out of Purdue, and he went to Purdue where they spread the field and threw it all over the field, and he well over 100 catches, about 100 yards a game, and it seemed like a touchdown a game. I mean, he's obviously a proven commodity there. But then you add the fact that he's a returner, punt and kickoff return. Is he better at one than the other? Or when you look at him as a return guy, Coach, what do you see in Charlie Jones?
Well, first of all, I see somebody that can handle the ball well. That's the number one prerequisite for me is that you got to be able to make good decisions. You got to be able to handle the ball. I think he catches it really well. He does a good job of understanding, what the rotation of the ball looks like, along with how the weather and the wind affect that. I think he does a good job of understanding the flight of the ball. What really jumps out to me is his quickness and his acceleration. How quickly he can get from point A to point B. That's what really, really sticks out to me. And he has really good body control. Has a good feel for movements. This guy was the 2021 Big Ten Special Teams Player of the Year at Iowa. Okay, and he has a punt return for kickoff. Is a punt return for a touchdown. He also has a kickoff return for a touchdown. I think one was in 2020, one was in 2021. I think he had 20 some catches maybe in 2021 at Iowa, and probably wanted to expand his tool belt a little bit.
Right.
And he probably made the right decision and transfers to Purdue and ends up catching 108 balls, I think. So he goes from 22 catches to 108.
Right.
So he certainly got a hell of a lot more play, and I think he showed, even though his return statistics didn't show that, I think he put more of his focus on getting his touches as a receiver, and it was probably a little less emphasis was placed on him as a returner at Purdue. But but that's in his past. That's he certainly has the return history in his past. It's something he's excited and ready to tackle. But he does both.
Seems like he's a guy too that a lot of people were talking about in the third round. There he was in the fourth round. It's like, wow, that's pretty. The Bengals would have been happy, I'm sure, with him in the third round. He's got that kind of ability. The big thing, I know that
you were in our draft room the other night. Were you in the draft room the other night?
Is that you guys talking about him a little bit? Yeah,
we almost took him in the third round. We had him up there. We had him up there in the third round. Almost took him there, and so we felt great about it when he was in the fourth.
Yeah, I mean that's so the hands that you talk about and everything. And I know one thing that you really respect and admire, and it's a must. It's a must for you is proper decision making. Don't be like caught in the middle. Between the rock and the hard place. Be definitive. Make a good decision with respect to if you're going to field the ball, not field the ball, and all that. He's clean that way, huh?
Yeah, I think he does a real good job of that. He. Like I said, that's the number one prerequisite you got to have. You got to be a great decision maker, because if you're constantly putting the team in a hole by making poor decisions, by fair catching punts inside the 5-yard line, trying to catch a ball in traffic and muffing it and losing it, it doesn't matter what type of physical ability you have. If you can't make the right decisions on when to or when not to, then it's a waste of time.
So let's look at, you can use Murphy on special teams, obviously, with that size speed ratio. DJ Turner, Jordan Battle, these guys, you said Jordan Battle's a guy that could play. He could be a 4-team guy for you. Is Turner the same? You mentioned corners. Is he more of a cover guy?
Yeah, I think he'll probably be more of a. I think he'll probably be more of a three-phase guy. We'll have to get him acclimated right away to playing gunner.
Right.
He'll have to be able to hold up physically. He needs to make sure he eats well before he comes here, so he gets that 170 whatever odd pound. He can get
Right.
up in the 180s, but still want to keep the speed.
Yeah.
Of course. But I think he'll be a player for us on punt. He'll certainly be a player for us on punt return, and he'll be a contributor for us on kickoff too. Anytime you got somebody that can run like that, whether he's tracking guys down or be able to stay on top of gunners on punt return, that'll be a big thing for us. The added speed there will be a big part.
We were just talking about with Lou Anarumo, the recoverability speed, is big. If somebody, it's going to happen. Somebody breaks one. Boy, if you can retrace and run people down, I mean, see a guy running out there in space, then somebody's able to just curtail that. That's invaluable. And you get some guys that can do that. Let's talk about Chase Brown out of Illinois, the running back. Is he got a special teams background, Coach?
Well, he did earlier in his career. I think he started off at Western Michigan maybe, and he had a little bit of playtime there. His playtime decreased as he obviously became the starting back, the bell cow back for him there at Illinois. He didn't do much for him the last 2 years, but I can tell you probably the first text that I got after the draft from our players of the new players was from him, and just introducing himself and just telling me how excited he was to get here and to be able to get to work. So that tells me he knows and understands how he's going to get on the field and what's going to give him potentially an edge over other guys in the group and I'm sure he knows he's behind in that area, right, in terms of the play time and experience. So I'm excited to get to work with all these guys. This is like one of the most exciting times of the year because it's like Christmas. You're even though you may know what's in the package, you just can't wait to play. To get going and play. So
that's right. Put it together. Yeah. Put it together and play. Assemble it. Yeah. What about Andre? And I'm going to pass on his last name for now, but Andre out of Princeton, the wide receiver. I mean, ridiculous athlete, 16-foot pole vaulter, 60-meter record in the pentathlon. I mean, this guy is a very, very credible athlete. Size, 6'3", big guy. Obviously, special teams capabilities.
Well, he didn't do much at Princeton, which I got to get on Bob Surace about that one. No, this guy's a size. Anytime you get a size, speed athlete who can run and do the things that he can do athletically, he's got himself a fighting chance. Now he just got to get the knowledge and the experience of actually doing it. It's different than being able to say, okay, I can run this fast, I can jump this high, I can, leap over small buildings in a single bound, but you've got to be able to stick your face in there and tackle somebody. You have to learn how to do that. And that's not just a craft or a technique that you're born with. It's something you have to learn how to do. So he's going to have to spend a lot of his time learning how to do those types of things, to put himself in position to, especially from the receiver spot, to make plays like, we've had some good ones here, some receivers that have played well, dating way back to Kevin Walter, Tab Perry, James Wright, Stanley Morgan right now. Those are all receivers that play effectively for you in coverage. And that's like an added bonus. Not often do you get an offensive player who's a dominant player for you in your coverage phases because they just don't do that stuff. They, usually they're the one running away from somebody as opposed to running them down and tackling them. So anytime you get a player there, it's a big bonus.
Well, I think it's two things. I think it's their desire, to do it, and it's your coaching ability to coach them up. I mean, I think, the guys that you talk about, the success stories there, I mean, they couldn't say enough good things about you as a coach and what you taught them, how you developed them. And then you always great things to say about their desire and their want to. And man, a combination like that, hopefully Andre's right in that category. Chase is as well, and away you go. I mean,
yeah, for sure. I think that's a big point. I think the desire and the want to is half of the battle. It's it's part of my job too as a coach to get them to understand the importance of it. Some of these guys come into it and this is from your experience as a player. Some of these guys come into it thinking that, I'm not going to have to play special teams. They draft me to be a running back. They drafted me to play receiver. Well, okay, if you play receiver, you want to play in front of Jamar Chase, or you want to play in front of T. Higgins, or you want to play in front of Tyler Boyd? I mean, which one you want to set on the bench so you can go in? Okay. Or, okay, running back, you want to play in front of Joe Mixon? Okay.
Right.
So you got to find ways to contribute. And it's good that some of these guys are understanding that. And it's also my job to get them to understand this is your most direct path to playing on Sundays is with me. Unless you're a first round pick or even in some cases, a second round pick. But, really the unique part about what came up for us in this draft, we didn't have to draft a starter.
Right.
I mean, we didn't have to draft a one of the 22 starters. The guys we were drafting here are obviously potential future starters.
Sure.
But they're also depth players too at each of those spots. So the quickest way a lot of these guys are going to get a play is with me. And the faster I can get them to understand that, and the faster that they can be productive, the better our team will be.
No doubt. I mean, they're all going to have a role, and special teams are going to be part of that role in 23, but 24 and 25, they may make a little bit more hay in terms of offense and defense. What about DJ Ivey, Coach? How much special teams in his background?
He has a ton. He had of all the guys, him and Jordan Battle right up there in terms of the most play time. DJ probably had a little bit more. Again, I think you're getting a size, speed guy who can run. Anytime you get a corner that's up there, it's close to 6 foot and weighs close to 200 pounds and runs in the 4.4s. And when you can get him in the 7th round, I mean that's you got yourself something there. So, whether it's the coaches or the scouts did a really good job of identifying him. He was a target for us for several rounds. He was a target for us back, a couple weeks ago that our people had a good feel for, were fond of, and had a really, really high liking to him, and they were hopeful that we would have access to him. And fortunately for us, we were in the 7th round. We were able to use a pick on him and get him here.
So the next phase, Coach, and as we're talking, you've got some guys probably that have agreed to terms and conditions but haven't passed physicals yet, so there's no official announcements to be made with respect to college free agents that might be Cincinnati Bengals. But I'm sure your evaluation or your basically your input into who to go after is big in this regard too, because here are guys coming to a football team. This is how they're going to make the football team. What can they do for you, right?
Yeah, I think it is. It's helpful. I think when it gets to the end of the draft, like the way it is now, there's some different rules are in place that sometimes makes it gives other teams maybe an advantage over getting access to these college free agents. The unique part about being a college free agent is you get a pick where you want to go. When you're drafted, you got no choice. I mean, you're going to that team. When it comes to college free agency, you get a pick where you want to go, and I can tell you probably 95% of the time it's who's willing to give you the biggest signing bonus.
Sure.
And I think that's where they make a mistake. I think they need to evaluate them and the representation. They need to evaluate the roster and what is the opportunity to make, not what's dangling right in front of the carrot that's dangling right in front of your nose in terms of signing bonus, but what's the bigger picture? Do you have a chance to make the 53-man roster? If not the 53-man roster, the practice squad. Because with the expansion of the practice squad in this league, it's your availability to players has grown immensely. I mean, when the practice squad used to be 5 players, and now we're at 16. And so the expansion of the roster has made such a big deal. So now instead of running out, on a Monday and having mass workouts when you have an injury at corner, instead of having a workout and working out 5 or 6 or 7 corners and signing one of them, and then trying to get them up to speed to play in the game on Sunday, now we just plop them up off the practice squad. So, I think that these guys need to make sure that all these undrafted guys, they need to do their work in terms of what's the best spot for me.
Right.
And it may not be what they get up front, but in the end, it may make a difference in the end if they make the roster or not, or what's my opportunity to make the roster or at a minimum make the practice squad. So sometimes I think these guys dangle, they go for what money that can be, what's the most immediate, money grab they can take versus, in the long term, what's the best for me.
And to me, there's a history of guys making the team that are in this exact situation. I mean, I remember my first year with the team in 1974, Paul Brown got up and he gave the same speech every year for 10 years. I heard it, but it was there were a lot of significant points that were always good to hear again, And the first thing he'd always say is, men, I don't give a damn how you got here. I don't care if you're a first-round choice or you weren't drafted. What are you going to do once you get here? That's all that counts. You're all on equal footing, men. I'm looking at you all the same. Who's going to impress me? It's what you do when you get here. And there's a history of guys, that have had opportunities given to them like this that have made football team. And the Bengals, I think, representatives around the league realize that the Cincinnati Bengals, that's a place where his client is going to get a fair shake.
Yeah, I think that's true too. I also think that, with the structure of the way the salary cap is and the limitations that, let's face it, that some of our top guys are going to take up a bigger portion of the cap each year.
Yep.
So
Yep.
those college free agents and even the lower level players, not in terms of skill, but in terms of pay, in terms of salary, are going to be big important parts for us. So, I think that the single biggest factor for some of these guys has got to be opportunity. And what makes the most sense for me in terms of an opportunity getting to play. And we've got a big history of guys doing that here, and signing as college free agents and ultimately us keeping them and them contributing. So we got a big history of that.
No doubt about it, Coach. I'll tell you, you put together the organization in its entirety has put together one heck of a football team. There's no question about it. And added to it once again, I'm excited about it. Excited to see the new guys. Excited to see how they work their way into the football team, how they integrate themselves. And there's always not only on the football field as players, but also in the locker room, how cohesive they become, and
Sure.
what the culture's like. And that's the other part of it that is so much fun to watch, man. We talked about it before. There's no jerk factor in that locker room, man.
No, it's not at all. We've really steered away from, questionable character guys, where some guys may fall in the draft. They have the ability that may be first round ability, but they have some character problems. They have some off the field issues. So then they slide down there to the third round. Okay, well, when does it become a more logical buy for us? When can we overlook some of that stuff? Because the ability's up here, but yet because of other factors, they dropped a little bit, and yet we've steered clear of those guys.
Yep.
And in the past, I think we've been more willing to take some of those guys on and try to manage them. And I think in the end, they always end up biting in the butt. At the most inopportune. Zebras don't change their stripes. They don't change their stripes. And so we've steered clear of those. We have the cohesiveness. The togetherness in our locker room is as good as it's ever been. And I think that's a big reason that we've been able to sustain some success here the last couple of years. Hopefully that'll continue. And I think it will, just based on, what I've seen so far.
I agree with that, Coach. And when you have players self-policing, and when there's not multiple sets of rules and the players can self-police, and all that, man, when they take control of their locker room like this group has, I mean, that's when you got it going, and it's going big time, man. It really is.
Well, when you have leaders in your locker room like DJ Reader and Sam Hubbards and the Ted Karrases and the young guys, even like Cordell Volsons that rise up to that, level. When you have those guys, that you don't want to, as a group, these young guys, they don't want to do anything to disappoint those guys. The standard that they hold everybody to is really high, because that's what they hold themselves to. And anytime you can keep raising the level of that, and then you can keep adding ability on top of that, but you get character guys, and then if you can just keep up with the ability, that's when you have championship teams.
Absolutely. And that's what we're looking here in Cincinnati. No question about it. Coach, great stuff as always. I know it's a super busy time of the year. You to carve time to visit with us means a lot, and appreciate you doing that, sir.
Well, I always appreciate coming on here. It's always a fun thing to do, and I respect what you guys do too. It's a ton of information, and it's good to get it out there.
Appreciate you.
Got it. Thank you, Lap.
Dave Lapham here, and every day I am grateful for my experience to have played professional football. As a player, I realize self-motivation, leadership, and appreciating your teammates are key. At First Star Logistics, you can use those same attributes to create the life you want for you and your family. Build your future by working hard like I did. You'll see results both on and off the field. Call First Star Logistics today and be part of our winning team.
Opportunity knocking.